What is going on, guys? My name is Cole McLennan, and today we are talking about this lens right here, which I used exclusively for about 8 months once I got my full frame Canon 6D. And we're going to talk about all the reasons why it made me a better photographer. Let's get into it. So like I said, we're going to talk about this lens right here today, which is the Canon 50mm Prime f1.4. Now, this isn't the cheapest 50mm they make. This isn't the nifty 50, which people have given to the f1.8, which is about $250-ish for me, which it's Canadian dollars. This is the f1.4, and I saw in a old Sawyer Hartman video that this is the lens that you need to buy, and I took his advice, and I have to say he was right. This is a beast of a lens, and the quality of the images is ridiculous. If you're trying to learn how to get better at photography or at portraits or at just looking for a nice crisp prime lens that isn't that expensive, this lens is it. Now let's get into some of the reasons why I think this lens is one of the best if you're just trying to learn and get better at photography. And other than just the decent price point that it comes at. The first reason is that this is a prime lens. It does not zoom, if you don't know what the word prime means. It is a fixed focal length at 50mm. Now, 50mm is actually a pretty good focal length. There's not any distortion. Your eye sees at about 35mm, so it's actually pretty close to that, but it's cropped in a little bit more than a 35 is. And it forces you to sort of get creative with some of your compositions and things like that. So because it's a prime lens, it forces you to learn composition. You can't just stand wherever, shoot from your hips or your chest, or fix a little bit going, I want to be a little closer, just zoom in a little bit more, or do the same thing zooming out. You're not able to do that because this lens doesn't zoom. And it's the same with all prime lenses. Prime lenses are considered to be one of the better ways to learn photography and composition in particular, because of that fact that you can't zoom and you're forced to move your body into where you actually want that shot to be taken from. And it's a great way to learn composition and to improve at that. And on that point, sometimes to fit your whole subject in, or to get the angle you're looking for, or to get that thing above them in the frame, you've got to get low, which looks and feels different than just zooming out. Now, I have a 24-70 on the camera right now, and if I was shooting at 50 and went, I kind of want their feet in it as well as this thing above their head, or a little bit more headroom, I could just zoom out a little bit. But that look and feel of that photo would be different than if you were to take this lens or a 24-70 and stay on that same focal length and just get a little lower and a little further away. The photo will feel different. You'll see that they have to look down, the subject has to look down at the camera. You'll see that the perspective of that photo is just completely different, and it's a great way to learn and get better and sort of force yourself to improve in those areas. Now, like I said, this lens is an f1.4 aperture, which means that the background gets completely blurred out. The depth of field is this, literally inches. You can actually have their nose in focus and their eyes out of focus if you're not too careful. And that's one of the great things about this lens. You are forced to learn how to focus your camera. I had never shot with anything this low. I'd never shot with anything below f4, and I'd never really shot with a full frame camera before. Now, I got this 6D Mark II along with this lens together, and that was my combo for the first 8 or so months of shooting on this camera. Now, I had to learn how to use single point focus solely for this lens. Now, if you don't know what single point focus is, it's one of the focus settings on your camera, most likely, that you're able to pick one of those focus points you see when you look in the viewfinder and focus specifically on that one. Now, when you're first starting photography, this can seem somewhat intimidating. This can seem somewhat time consuming. It's a whole other step when you're shooting. Not only do you have to get your settings correctly, your shutter speed, your aperture, all those things, you also have to set up your focus point which means you have to know what you're going to be shooting and you have to set that up beforehand or change it on the fly if you're fast enough. Now, with an aperture as low as f1.4, the margin for error is very small, and you actually have to get that focus point, that single focus point, directly on their eye, on the subject if you're doing portraits, directly on that subject's eye if you want that eye in focus. And even if they have their head turned or at a profile and you focus on the front eye, their back eye is going to be out of focus as well. So it really forces you to learn how to deal with depth of field and getting things in focus. And there were hundreds of shots that were out of focus before I started being able to consistently get the results I was looking for with this low aperture, because I love having that buttery smooth background and that bokeh in the background. It's incredible, and this lens does a fantastic job at it, and it's personally developed my style to what it is today because of it. And I really think that it helped a lot with improving my focus. Now, because I only had this one lens and this one focal length and this one body for so long, I was able to practice very consistently and get extremely comfortable with a 50mm lens. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. If you were to ask me to stand in front of you and stand the distance away for me to be able to get a waist-up portrait of you, I'd probably be able to do it without looking in a viewfinder almost first try, probably first try. And being able to be that comfortable with your equipment goes a long way when you're first starting out. Being able to be consistent with what equipment you're using and not changing it around too much allows you to improve the basics at a much faster rate. Because if you're trying to learn photography and you're starting out and you're doing food photography and you're doing landscapes and you're doing portraits and things like that, you're slowly building up each one of those categories and those skills that it takes for each one of those categories as you practice. Not saying you shouldn't practice all the different categories that you like, but being able to just do what I did, which is only portraits, only on this lens, only on this body, I was able to get really consistent and really comfortable with this setup. Now, if I were to pick up any 50mm lens or this 24-70, set it to 50mm, I'm extremely comfortable. I feel like I'm in my element and I know what to do with it. And because of that knowledge that I gained on how to get proper focus and how to use my composition properly, I feel like I'm able to take those skills and transfer it to a zoom lens like a 24-70 or even a 35 prime or an 85 or things like that, and do a better job than I would have been able to do if I started on a zoom lens like a 24-70. Now, I just want to show you a couple examples of photos that I took as I was learning this lens and this body combination. And I just want to show you the improvement that sort of happened as I was able to practice and use this consistently. So first, these shots. This is actually the first photo shoot I did with this combo. And I had already been doing photos before. I was actually using this combo right here, this D3100 with a 10-24 lens on it. I also had my brother's 18-200 zoom lens as well, which was a ridiculous lens. How many focal ranges it had. But I was doing photography before this, so I was able to implement some of that knowledge into this photo as well, and into everything going forward. So I already knew some composition and things like that, but there's still things to improve on this photo. Too much headroom. I missed the focus a little bit. The space in front of her, the looking room, is a little bit too small. So there's still things I would have changed. This one, pretty decent headroom, but still a beginner shot, especially in the settings. It's kind of grainy and things like that. This one, again, she's on the right side. She's looking out to the right side. There's too much space to her left. I wanted to show the whole numbers and everything, but I should have gotten her to look at the other side. That's also part direction and learning that as a portrait photographer as you get better. But again, very much looks like a beginner photo on a decent camera. This was a shot with my friend Haley. I was actually very proud of this shoot when it happened. I am happy with those shots. I could honestly go back in and edit some of these again, and I feel like I'd do a better job now. But still, getting a little bit better, starting to learn composition a little bit more. This one, she's a little bit off center, a little bit too low in the frame. I wanted to show the Chateau font or Chateau Laurier in the back, but still framing issues, things like that, not getting low enough, not getting close enough, still a lot to improve on. And then we get to this shot, which I I would say is starting to be a bit of a turning point for my portrait photography. I started to figure out what I was doing a little bit more, and sort of creating my own style and colors and things like that in my editing. Then we get to this rooftop portrait, super clean portrait, but I think I cut off her arm a little bit too much. The background's a little bit busy, a little bit too much headroom, but still colors are clean, focus is clean, the eyes are sharp, things like that. The framing is getting a little bit better, even though I cut off a little bit of her jacket and a little bit of her elbow, but still things are improving by a long shot. This photo on the stairs with her hair movement and the plant behind and the foreground element, things are in focus, things are well lit. I was thinking about composition and lighting and all these things. And being able to be comfortable with the equipment allows me to be able to worry about things like lighting and movement in the shot and things like that. So it was really starting to get comfortable at this point. This was a shot with my brother just downtown quickly on a whim. We were just exploring the city. He was visiting for a couple days. And again, that backlighting and the framing and the rule of thirds down there. And because this one has a lot of headroom, but it's also, I would say, an environmental portrait. So it has the building in the back is sort of where the headroom would normally be on like a close-up portrait or something like that. So it's a lot more focused on him being in that bottom left corner, and that rule of thirds intersect, and then the backlight, and that's the whole subject of that photo. But I was still able to focus on a lot more than just composition by this point. Again, same shoot, just another shot. Same thing, using framing and composition fairly well. A little bit too much headroom, I would say. But those lines going in on either side of him with that nice tree in the background, that yellow looking tree, and the light in front of him lighting up his hair and sort of creating that halo. Great shot, I would say, but a little more, little lower, and I'd be perfect. Then we start getting into some more creative shots. Eyes are perfectly in focus. Starting to bring in, this shot was done with a prism, so I'm starting to bring in some more creative things, and things are really just starting to ramp up. Then this shot was on the same wall, but after they had painted it, with my friend Preston. Again, like I was saying, having something above him that you want to show, you have to really get low, and change your perspective, and that would feel different if I was not bent down all the way and was just using like a 24mm at like waist height and taking that. It would look different. And then we get to this photo, which if you watched my editing tutorial, you would know what this is from. And this is sort of everything coming together. I've got leading lines, I've got composition, I've got editing down a little bit. The colors are there. I really like the tones. The eyes are in focus. Everything's coming together. There weren't really any mistakes in the shooting. There was no clipping or anything like that. Things are really starting to get comfortable and starting to come together. But yeah, to bring it all together, I would say that this 50mm 1.4 is a great lens to learn on. As you can see, the bokeh is lovely. The background is so buttery at 1.4. This does a great job. It's super crisp. You can definitely get those eyes in focus every single time if you start learning how. And there's so much detail. It's kind of ridiculous for the price point of this lens. So if you're trying to get better at photography and you don't want this lens, I would say try out a prime lens. A nifty 50 would work, which is just a 1.8 version of this lens. A 35mm would work, an 85 would work. Or if you just really want the variability of a zoom lens and the convenience that comes with that, then that's definitely something as well. But just try and keep all the same points in mind with learning composition and learning focus and learning getting comfortable with your equipment is definitely huge. So try and take all of that into consideration when you're buying your next lens. And I would say I'm a better photographer because of this lens. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe down below. Leave a comment if you think I missed anything about why the prime lenses are great or why this lens is great. Or if you just want to start a conversation, I'd love to have one with you. If you want to start one in somewhere else, you can follow me at Cole McLennan. That's where all of my photography lives. That's where my updates live. And we can definitely chat there. Feel free to DM me, tag me in your posts. I'd love to see them. And make sure to hit that like button down below. It definitely helps with the YouTube algorithm and get these videos in front of more people. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace. Bye.